I gave a talk last night to a bunch of students at Clemson University, and as often happens when you talk to a bunch of really sharp young people with good questions, it spawned a lot of thoughts and robust discussions. And so, what I wanted to do was share some of the insights from that conversation that I had and give you a little bit of updates in terms of uh, kind of my current thinking on post labor economics. So, the overarching questions that people ask are if we are heading for an AI revolution, a cognitive labor revolution, how is the economy going to work after everyone loses their jobs? What industries will survive and which ones will collapse? So, we're going to unpack this from an individual level as well as an aggregate level, looking at the economy as a whole. So, if you're new to this channel or you're new to this concept, post labor economics is a new economic paradigm that I personally predict is going to be coming, where the very short version is if you no longer need human labor, what else changes? If the combination of AI, quantum computing, robots, and other automation replaces the need for human labor, then obviously a lot of things change. This means that we'll have to fundamentally renegotiate our relationship with labor, with work, with money, with businesses, and so on and so forth. So, as AI ramps up very quickly, it's gaining new capabilities on a literally on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis. We are heading towards a hyperabundance of cognitive labor, of knowledge work. Uh, uh, in the third industrial revolution, we had a revolution of internet and computers. So communication accelerated, number crunching accelerated, but by and large, automation was still relegated to manufacturing processes. Now, with this rise of artificial intelligence, we're looking at what's called labor substitution, in which case you have machines that are able to do new kinds of automation. We're able to not just automate manufacturing jobs, we're able to automate knowledge work. And so this is going to drastically disrupt the employment landscape. And of course, the prevailing wisdom is that technology always creates new jobs. This isn't necessarily true. What technology does is it lowers costs, which we will also talk about later in this video. But when you lower costs, that frees up capital and time and energy and money to be used elsewhere, which then creates new sectors of demands, new total addressable markets, which then translates to new jobs. So there's actually several degrees of separation between technologies and jobs growth. However, if those new markets are also addressable by the machines that we're building, that's not necessarily going to translate to human jobs. So, with all that being said, how is this going to work? How is this going to look? So, what I'm going to present is not necessarily a complete picture because the idea of post-labor economics is still evolving, but I think it is a worthwhile and necessary conversation to have moving forward, particularly as AI ramps up. So, prima facie benefits. Just at first glance, there's obviously a lot of benefits to having a ramp up of AI, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. Number one, productivity surge. If you have better machines, more intelligent computers, better language models, and increasingly advanced AI, you get productivity benefits. This has already been empirically proven. Where, for instance, Microsoft just had their Ignite keynote speech, where developers that use copilots are 55% more productive. In some cases, depending on the task, you can be 200% more productive. And based on the work that I'm doing, I think that before too long, we're just going to replace human labor altogether in some domains, and it's going to be just completely taken over by machines. So an old school example of this is think about telephone operators. Telephone operators were entirely substituted by automatic telephone routing machines. Likewise, I think that a lot of coding and a lot of other computer-centric jobs are going to be just fully automated away before too long, and the speed of productivity is going to go up. That's a good thing, but it also has knock-on effects and consequences. Scientific acceleration. So as I've produced some tools in the past about reading and summarizing papers, and now of course we have chatbots that have 100,000 token windows. You can stuff a whole bunch of scientific papers into these. There's also better AI-based tools to search for papers. So pretty much every scientist that I've talked to is now using AI to accelerate their work. Now, obviously, it's not doing primary science on its own. This is helping with things like literature reviews and then drafting manuscripts. But still, it's helping. And then you look at the contribution that labs such as DeepMind are doing, where they're actually creating fundamentally new step changes in what is scientifically capable with tools like AlphaFold. So if you're not familiar with AlphaFold, this is an AI model that allows you to accurately predict the ways that proteins will fold, which has greatly accelerated drug discovery and other kinds of biomedical research. There's also, creativity is being drastically impacted now. We're just starting to see the first like full scale productions of text to video. And I don't remember who, but someone just predicted that the first 90-minute Hollywood feature film will be created within the next year. And so that also has profound implications, because if it becomes infinitely cheaper to make a Hollywood blockbuster film, that's going to disrupt Disney, Hollywood, Netflix. It's going to disrupt, the celebrity culture, and also just the way that we consume digital entertainment. So that is going to be profoundly disruptive. But again, on the surface, it's a good thing, because then it's like, okay, well, we get more entertainment and it's cheaper and faster and more personalized. We can also scale problem solving. Basically, if you've watched some of my recent videos about agents and agent swarms, once you can instantiate one good AI model, you can instantiate billions of copies of that AI model. That is cognitive labor that is scalable in a way that is not scalable with humans. And this is something that I talk about when I talk about like the automation paradox, is because until you get that final automation engine online, nothing really happens. But then, so 0% of the work gets done until the very end, and then it's done, and then 100% of the work gets done very quickly. And then, of course, this will also have knock-on effects in terms like education and many other industries that we'll unpack later in this video. One thing that I predict is going to happen is what I call price collapse. So this is not rocket science, but as we're already seeing, for instance, all the graphics in this slide deck were generated in a few seconds with AI. So rather than paying a graphic designer hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per video, it literally cost me a few cents with DALL-E and Midjourney to make the graphics. So that is a price collapse of a factor of hundreds, if not tens of thousands of times cheaper and faster to do it. You can expect the same kinds of price collapses for all kinds of services. As I just mentioned, once we nail text to video, that means a 90-minute Hollywood blockbuster, instead of costing $100 million, is going to cost $10,000, if that, maybe less. Legal services, financial services, all kinds of things, medical services, healthcare. The knock-on effects are very difficult to overstate because we don't really have a mental model. We don't have personal experience when entire job sectors and labor markets are drastically disrupted, not by 10% or 50%, but by 10,000% or 1,000,000% cheaper. We just don't have a way of comprehending the economic effects that has. Now, even in industries where AI does not directly impact it. So for instance, AI can't necessarily make steel move faster in ships. AI can't make trees grow faster. However, by removing human labor from it, you can still drastically reduce the cost of primary goods and services like coal, steel, timber, stone, asphalt, concrete, those sorts of things. And so even then, some of the costs can be reduced and avoided, not 100%, but we're going to have this really interesting economic paradigm where some things, primary resources like land, are going to mostly hold their value, but other goods and services are going to basically be free. And this is why I think that billionaires like Bill Gates are buying up forest land and farmland, because they're reading the writing on the wall saying, don't invest in financial industries, don't invest in healthcare, don't invest in X, Y, and Z. Instead, invest in things that are going to stick around. And I'll talk about industries that I predict are going to stick around. Now, one thing I need to caution is this is not investing advice. This is not financial advice. This is just me reading the tea leaves in what I see and my interpretation of the investing behavior of others. In no means is this a recommendation, because I could be completely and fundamentally wrong about all of this. So you have been thoroughly warned. Another component of this whole trend is reduced aggregate demand. So one of the students that I gave the talk to asked a really phenomenal question about if, for instance, we all start losing our jobs, then we, the consumers, have less money, And in aggregate, we will have less demand. So this is going to impact what businesses actually produce. Because if we have less demand, businesses are going to be less incentivized to produce goods and services for us because, well, you don't try and sell something to people that don't have money. And so this is actually one of the biggest questions that I see all the time on the comments as well, is if we don't have money to spend, how is the economy going to work? So I'm not going to fully address this in this video, but civilians, we're not the only consumers. There's also business to business transactions as well as business to government transactions, which I think the bulk of the economy is going to shift to being B2B and B2G, or public sector expenditures. Now, there are also some primary demands that all civilians have, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But I did need to address that reduced aggregate demand is probably one of the biggest risk factors that we'll see in terms of the economy stalling if and when we see unemployment rates rising sharply. Because again, if you go from a six-figure job or even a $50,000 job and you end up stuck on unemployment benefits or universal basic income, and your income is reduced to $20,000 a year, that is, you have substantially less market power, purchasing power in the economy as an actor. And so this is really going to fundamentally disrupt the economy. Again, it remains to be seen if this happens, but there has been some recent reports, very alarming reports, showing that AI such as ChatGPT are already disrupting a very broad spectrum of industries, and some in very unexpected ways. So I've told this story before, but one of my former clients, told me a story where once the data analytics tool came out with ChatGPT, it replaced an entire bioinformatics statistician, which that's a job that you need a master's degree or a PhD to do. And so then suddenly, this tool that costs $20 a month dislocates a job, a human-paying job that would have cost $8,000 a month or more to have a human in that role. So that is the magnitude of reduced aggregate demand that we're looking for, or that we're looking at happening. Now, there is another component of this, which is primary needs, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So what this is all leading to is fundamentally new market paradigms. And so this paradigm shift, this slide is more about some predictions that I have. So for instance, if we have robots, if we have AI, then perhaps as we're kind of moving towards deglobalization, and there's trends such as circular economies and farm to table, I wonder if we're going to see the same thing with manufacturing of goods and also providing of services. Because if you can just provide goods and services on demand locally, rather than having long logistics chains. So for instance, imagine that your theater is running a local version that it just generated in the cloud rather than waiting for Hollywood. Likewise, imagine that you go to the Amazon store and instead of some goods that are manufactured in China, it's just 3D printed in the back. So this is a little bit more speculative, but we already have some fictional examples of this, like the replicators in Star Trek. It's within the realm of possibilities, but I think more eminently what we'll see is on-demand production of digital goods and digital services, such as legal services, entertainment, music, that sort of thing. That stuff is already in the pipeline. Local manufacturing of physical goods, that may or may not happen, but I just wanted to point out that we are looking at some of these kinds of shifts. Now, one thing that could happen is that as the economic landscape changes, we could see what's called industry narrowing, which is that many companies and many job sectors or market segments might just go away for good because they're made completely irrelevant. Those business models are made completely obsolete. So time will tell, but it has happened before. An example is you don't really have horse breeders as a major economic thing anymore. Why? Because horses as an entire industry were replaced by automobiles over a century ago. And so while horse care and horse breeding and carriage building and all that fun stuff was a major industry, because horses were used for everything. Draft horses were used on farms. They were used for moving goods and services and moving people. Now that's no longer a thing. And so we've seen it before. We will see it again, but it's difficult to predict exactly which industries will fully collapse and be kind of relegated to a luxury service. Because there are still horse breeders, but this is more of old money kind of stuff. So what are the industries that will survive? Just off the cuff, here's kind of what I brainstormed as the industries that I think will probably stick around and be relatively durable. Again, this is not investing advice. Personally, I am not invested in any of these, so take everything that I'm saying here with a gigantic grain of salt. But first and foremost, raw materials and energy. We're going to need steel, we're going to need concrete and stone, we're going to need timber, we're going to need water, right? Those kinds of things are based on primary needs. So that is something that if you're a living, breathing human being, you need food, you need shelter, you need clothes. So some of those things are the demand for those is going to be persistent, even if it's fully automated, even if it is done by machines and robots and AI. Semiconductors, obviously, if everything is running on AI, we're going to need chip fabs. We're going to need memory, CPUs, GPUs, RAM, servers, supercomputers. That industry is sticking around. If anything, it's going to be bigger. It might be the primary industry, honestly, because I also predict that in the long run, it's just more economically feasible for open source data and open source models. I just watched the entire Microsoft Ignite keynote speech. Microsoft is going all in on closed source models like GPT-4. They're also going all in on open source models. So they're hedging their bets. However it pans out, Microsoft and NVIDIA, it's all going to be running on their hardware and their cloud platforms, whether or not it's produced by OpenAI, whether or not it's produced by Meta, or whether it's produced by Carnegie Mellon or whoever else. Robotics and automation. If you build the tools that build the tools, you're set. So there's a meme that goes around that says, during a gold rush, sell pickaxes. So the ones that sell the pickaxes, the ones that sell the robots that do everything else, the ones that sell the automation hardware and software that do everything else, they're going to be fine. Sustainable tech. So this is going to have to do with water, agriculture, sustainable farming, solar energy, other renewables, whether it's thorium reactors or molten salt or nuclear fusion, whatever. Those things, again, because energy is a primary need, and as well as food, I think that those industries are going to stick around, which again is why I think people like Bill Gates are investing in farmland and timberland. Makes sense to me. If I were in their shoes, I'd do the same exact thing. And then finally, experience industries. So as we all transition away from working, the 9-to-5 grind, which I can say from personal experience, like you get rid of the desk job, you get bored and you want stuff to do. So that means movie theaters, that means restaurants, that means yoga studios, that means retreats, vacations, Airbnbs, all kinds of everything around the experience industry, I think is going to be a major, major pillar of the economy moving forward. But again, it's going to be interesting because technically film and TV are part of the experience industry, but the models, the cloud providers that build the models that write the new TV shows and movies, those are going to be the ones that stick around. Netflix, if they don't pivot, they're not going to stick around. Disney, if they don't pivot, they're not going to stick around. Now, I did look it up before I made this video. Disney did actually assemble like a strike force, an AI strike force, that they're actively exploring every way that they can incorporate AI into their business. So I think Disney is probably well positioned to stick around. And they're already using AI for their animatronics. They're already using AI to help with drafting movies. Maybe they should have used AI for Ant-Man Quantumania, or maybe they did use AI and that was the problem. I don't know. So what are the industries that I predict are going to go extinct? First, healthcare. I've mentioned this before, where when you combine regenerative medicine, rejuvenation therapies, and all the advancements that we're going to see from AlphaFold 2, AlphaFold 3, and everything else, I suspect that our relationship with healthcare is going to be fundamentally and drastically different within 5 to 10 years. A lot of people still ask me, like, Dave, when are we going to hit longevity escape velocity? Last year, there were 3 rejuvenation therapies in the pipeline. This year, there are 20. The economic incentive to nail rejuvenation therapies is so high. And it's getting investment from everyone from DARPA to like all of Silicon Valley. Google has, Alphabet has their rejuvenation, their regeneration therapy wing. So it's coming. The money is there. Where the money goes, results follow. The same thing has happened with solar. The same thing has happened with AI. So the money is there. It's just a matter of time. I remember, back in 2010 when I first started paying attention to solar, and I'm like, oh, it's ramping up. And now a lot of nations and a lot of companies are exceeding their, carbon neutral targets. Obviously, that's a contentious field, so I'm not going to get too bogged down into it. But the point being is that back in 2010, Nobody thought that like solar would be where it is today, and now it is. Likewise, the investment is ramping up in regenerative medicine, so it's coming down the pipeline. Education is also gonna fundamentally change. A lot of us are already using ChatGPT and other tools to learn as fast as we can. I've actually consulted with a bunch of different startups that are trying to do either tools for teachers, tools for universities, or avatars to teach students. If you ever watch Star Trek Voyager, you go to the holodeck and you have like a personalized holodeck program with VR. That's entirely possible that you're going to have, students have one-on-one mentoring sessions with holographic avatars. That would be really cool. So university systems are currently deeply strained. And if if jobs are going away, then you're not going to be going to university to get a better job. So then why would you go to university? That's a conversation for another time, but that is something that some of the students at Clemson asked. And my short answer was university experience is good if you're going to become a global citizen, and you still have a monumental task before you in helping the human species become a truly global species and a global culture, because we are not right now. We are very, very fragmented. Financial automation. Now, obviously, Wall Street and the finance industry and the investment industry, that's not going away. But insurance and a bunch of other things, I honestly suspect that the margins are going to get too thin on a lot of these industries, and it's going to be radically restructured. And then finally, as I've been talking about, I do think that our relationship with digital entertainment is going to fundamentally shift, and I think we're going to see a lot of implosions and a lot of collapses. Because again, if you need to pay an A-list celebrity $20 million to make a movie, or you could make 200 movies with AI for the same price, guess which one you're probably going to do just for the sake of economics. Real quick plug for my Patreon. I have an upcoming webinar masterclass on December 8th at 11 a.m. U.S. Eastern. I have two tiers on my Patreon. There's the $5 basic tier, which gets you access to Discord, and then the $50 premium tier, which gets you access to a bunch more exclusive content. But yeah, so go ahead and sign up if you're interested. And moving right back along into the show. So I mentioned primary needs. So this is a first principles view of what is it that people need? Because there are 8 billion people on the planet, and even if money goes away tomorrow, even if everything is fully automated, this is an attempt to take a first principles view of, okay, what is it that people actually need? Because where there's a need, there's a way. If there's the biological, the animal impetus to achieve these things, we will figure it out. So, I've got a little infographic. So there's food, there's housing, there's water, there's energy. So those are all primary needs. And I think that as the economy pivots, those industries, as I mentioned, are going to be the ones that are the most durable. Power generation, food preparation, production and movement, homes, that sort of thing. This is why, for instance, many people have said the housing industry is the safest investment because everyone needs somewhere to live. Likewise, food is something that everyone needs, but the margins are already really thin on food. But so this, I think, is going to be focusing on a primary needs economic paradigm is going to be the first phase of the pivot to post-labor economics, because people have talked about universal basic income or universal basic services. If we see a commensurate price collapse, it's entirely possible that electricity will basically become free, at least at the scale that most people consume it at. My power bill that I just paid was $180. What if that goes down to $18 a month because of hyperabundance of solar and other renewables? What if water becomes practically free, clean, healthy water because of energy hyperabundance? What if all the knock-on effects of AI and automation makes houses cheaper because the price of timber goes down and the price of concrete goes down? And also then the cost of building houses goes down because then you can do it with robots. So again, I think that it is not outside the realm of possibility that the cost of living within the next 5 to 10 years could go down by as much as 10x. So if your cost of living right now is $40,000 a year, you might be able to have the same standard of living with $4,000 a year in 10 years. That's kind of what I'm hoping for, because that price collapse will offset the reduced aggregate demand. Because yes, people might have less money, but if everything is that much cheaper, or even more let's say prices go down 100x, but your income goes down 10x, you're effectively 10 times wealthier than you were before. So obviously, if all you have in life is just housing and food and clothes, that's relatively boring. So I then took a look at secondary needs. So secondary needs are the spice of life. This is the stuff that makes life interesting and fun and engaging. And so the categories that I came up with were rich experiences. So like travel, vacations, peak experiences like concerts and dance clubs and that sort of stuff. Those are going to be something that is very persistent. There's going to be a durable demand for that. Creativity and expression. So again, as you have more time and you get away from the office job, I and many people like me are engaging more and more in creative pursuits. I'm writing a novel. I know lots of people that as soon as they retire, they go back to acting and singing and that sort of thing. I know plenty of people who are painters and digital artists. And so the industries around those, even if those are cottage industries and they're not primary economic drivers, the persistent demand for human creativity and artistic expression is going to be around as long as there are humans. Intellectual stimulation. So there are many of us who just want challenges for the sake of challenges. So even if AI can do everything, people are still going to play chess. Again, machines are already better than humans at chess. We still play chess. People are still going to be programming and coding and doing hackathons. Yes, even if the AI can do it better, you still want to test your mettle against the machine. So reading for pleasure, those kinds of things. Obviously, not everyone is a nerd like me. So not everyone is like, you know what, if I don't have to use my brain, I'm just going to go to the beach. That's perfectly fine too. Culture and community is another aspect that I think is going to stick around and actually probably be magnified. So what I mean is walkable cities, green spaces, parks, co-living and co-housing situations, community centers, religious experiences, whether churches. There's a lot of talk around the future of ideology, like is Christianity growing or going away? There's geopolitical tensions between, for instance, Christianity and Islam, but there's also a resurgence of neo-paganism. Witches are all the rage right now, so that sort of thing. But then also, there's still talk about the meaning crisis and that sort of thing, and so people are, kind of desperate for that meaning and that connection, particularly when you think about the fact that we're in the middle of a loneliness epidemic. So the need for culture, community, and spirituality and connection are also going to be persistent, and those are presently underserved needs. I've been a big fan of the book The Status Game by William Storr, and so one thing that I realized is, or one question that I get is, okay, well, if you can't make money, and therefore you can't build up your social status through conspicuous consumption, what do we do? Well, there's lots of other ways to build up status. You can get famous on YouTube. You can, go to the gym and get a sexy body. You can become a chess grandmaster. There's all kinds of things that you can do. You can become a musician. Social status throughout history has been largely predicated on other things other than wealth. Wealth as a social status is a relatively new phenomenon. Particularly under capitalism and neoliberalism, where you incentivize people to accumulate more wealth because, again, conspicuous consumption is one of the best ways to signal status. But there are plenty of other ways to signal status through education, piety, spirituality, intellectual pursuits, physical pursuits like athleticism. Again, like that's why I picked this image of a bunch of attractive young people laying on the beach. Why? Because part of what's happening in this image is status. They're signaling their status by literally showing off their bodies. That's one thing that people do. And if you ever go to the gym, there are people that do that. Boys and girls, men and women will show off their bodies at the gym. And that's part of why they're doing it, is because it makes them feel good. They go to the gym and they're like, I'm shredded. I look really good. So anyways, I do suspect that as people come to understand this, that a status economy is going to replace the attention economy. And we already see this, like, YouTubers and other influencers that have more subscribers, they're like, well, I've got, 5 times the subscribers that you do, so therefore I'm better. So like it's a popularity contest, but that is a proxy for the status contest. Now, this is the biggest thing that scares me is, and this is what I actually am really interested in talking to more people about, is forming a new social contract. So the current social contract is around a 3-way relationship between the government. So we got Uncle Sam here, and then we got the corporate fat cats, and then we've got ordinary people. So right now, Uncle Sam, the government, mediates the relationship between the businesses and the people, the labor workforce. But if the demand for labor goes away, then suddenly the government and businesses are holding all the cards. And that's a surefire way to get a dystopian hellscape. So how do we do that? How do we navigate and fix it? First, we need to rebalance power. This means that we need to shift the priority away from businesses and more towards people and government, particularly voter power. And we'll do this through shoring up democratic institutions, such as voter reforms, increasing civic engagement, adding new levers of power that all humans, but that citizens have in terms of steering the government and ensuring that the government serves the people as much, if not more, than businesses. We'll need some sort of redistribution mechanisms, and honestly, having some sort of redistribution behooves the businesses, because again, if aggregate consumer demand goes down, that's bad for business, right? If your customers are all broke, that's no good. So we'll need to make sure that consumers have money to spend in order to keep the economy going, and pretty much, some sort of redistribution, whether it's negative income tax or UBI or universal basic services. We'll need something. The way that I articulated it mathematically is if wealth and income inequality gradients are too steep, then you can't go uphill. You can't go uphill forever. And this will also require some kind of regulatory overhaul. Now, there are a lot of tools in the toolbox in terms of fiscal policy and monetary policy that are already available. So what I suspect is going to happen is that the establishment is going to do very small incremental changes across the board. It's not going to be one big policy. It's going to be dozens, if not hundreds, of little incremental policy changes on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis to adjust slowly. Because again, law of unintended consequences. If you change too many things at once, you might end up making things worse, which would be bad. So just as a recap on this whole thing, we're talking at the highest level about knowledge labor substitution. The 4 criteria that I give is better, faster, cheaper, safer. As machines and AI become better, faster, cheaper, and safer than humans at knowledge work, one, there's no economic incentive to keep humans in those jobs. But then it could also be considered unethical to keep humans in those jobs. So for instance, if an AI doctor is better, faster, cheaper, and safer than a human doctor, who are you going to go to? You're going to go to the robot doctor because the outcomes are going to be better and it's going to be cheaper. And in that scenario, it might become unethical to allow humans to continue practicing medicine. Likewise, for driving, once we stick the landing on full self-driving, and let's say that automatic cars can drive 10 billion miles, per fatality or less, might become illegal to allow humans to continue driving, except in certain circumstances. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Reduced aggregate demand is going to be one of the major economic signals that we're going to be afraid of, because if aggregate consumer demand goes down, the economy falters, so on and so forth. So we'll need something to shore that up. Now, again, the converse of that is price collapse might kind of offset that. But that's 2 very powerful deflationary pressures, which we should expect to see some deflationary pressure because that's what technology does. It makes goods and services cheaper. But I don't think we're ready for how much cheaper some of those goods and services are going to be. So then I talked about primary needs, which is just first principle, look at yourself as an animal. What is it that you need, and what are you willing to work or fight or whatever to get? That's food, water, clothing, housing, your basic fundamental needs. Status economy is going to be a big component of how this all shakes out in terms of our social living, how we live on a day-to-day basis. Some of these things, like some of the goods and services that stick around, will be about status. But when I talk about status economy, I'm talking more about actually how we allocate our personal time and resources. We might spend more time at the gym. We might spend more time practicing piano, like that sort of stuff. And I'm talking about myself here. Like, I was just like, I used to play piano as a kid. You know what? It might be time for me to pick that up again. Why? Because I enjoyed it and I was pretty good at it. I've completely forgotten it all because it was, I'm not going to say how long ago it was. It was a long time ago. New social contract. So negotiating a new social contract, honestly, changing the narratives around money and around democracy is probably the hardest part of all this. Because as I said, we've got lots of tools in the financial toolbox in terms of monetary policy and fiscal policy. However, in America, our narratives around the ownership class, around wealth, around privilege, around the elites, that is probably going to be the biggest sticking point, honestly, because a lot of people are temporarily embarrassed millionaires. And so they're like, oh, well, protect the millionaire class, protect the corporate class at all costs. And it's like, they don't need any protection. They're fine. So we need to change the focus from the engines of productivity to us. And I'm not talking about radically restructuring the entire economy, but we need to change something. And then finally, as I already mentioned, deflationary pressures. So I don't need to rehash that. Thanks for watching. I hope you got a lot out of this video. Like, subscribe, so on and so forth. I'll see you next time. Cheers.